Sahana bhavatu, Sahano bhunaktu, Sahaviryam karavavahai, Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Samasta jana kalyane niratam karunamayam namami chinmayam devam sadgurum brahmavidvaram. Om Namah Shivaya, 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 Om Namah Shivaya. For most of us, we seek a lot less from Vedanta than Vedanta has the potential to give us. And this makes sense because if we don't know what it has to offer us, then how will we know to ask? But when we come to know the result and the quality of that result that is available to us, to not seek it it seems like a shame. It seems like a waste. And so even though our work becomes a lot more efficient, our relationships are improved, the way that we live in this world and our quality of life seems to improve the more that we understand Vedanta. It's important for us not to forget that actually the goal of life and the achievement that is being pointed out to us is a lot bigger than career success. It's a lot bigger than having improved relationships. It's actually bigger than anything. It's bigger than most of what the human imagination stretches to. Because it is, as described in Vedanta, that achievement, having gained which there is nothing more. Right? And having known which there is nothing more to know. Now, to get to a point where we recognize the kind of magnitude of that, especially in relation to the daily life that we live, requires some work. And Nirvana Shatakam is for someone who has done that work and who is at the point where they have recognized there is nothing else in my life that can be as important as this. And there is nothing which can be more meaningful than this knowledge becoming my knowledge. And so whether we are there or not, if we still have other priorities in life, this knowledge can still be helpful to us. Because what it does for us is it puts things into perspective, right? Those things which seem so huge and overwhelming and like nothing else matters, when we delve a little bit into Vedanta, we get that perspective. And we recognize that actually, this is probably something I can deal with. And if it seems huge today, it's probably not going to be that big next week or next month. So this knowledge can be helpful to anyone at any stage. But it becomes truly meaningful when we're ready to absorb everything of what's being said. And this composition is giving us a glimpse into what that looks like, right? What does it look like when my vision of life and of this world aligns with the Vedantic vision of this world, aligns with the Rishi's vision of this world? How did Puja Gurudev see this world? I can align myself to that by aligning myself with these teachings. So we are looking at this very beautiful verse today, verse number 5. So we'll read the verse and then we'll see some of those ideas. Na me mrityu shanka, na me jati bhedaha, na me mrityu shanka, jati bhedaha. Pita naiva me naiva mata na janma. Na bandhur na mitram gurur naiva shishya. Mitram gurur naiva shishya. Chidananda rupa shivoham shivoham. Chidananda rupa shivoham shivoham. So the refrain at the end is the same. He says, I have no mrityu shanka. I have no fear of death. I have no jati bheda, caste distinction. I have no father, no mother, no birth. I have no relations, no friends. I have no guru and no disciple. I am consciousness, bliss. I am Shiva. So there are two main things that are pointed out here. Right? One is death, mrityu, and one is birth, janma. And the scary one comes first. Nobody is scared of life. Most of us are scared of death. In spite of the fact that, as they say, there are only two things which are certain in life, and those two things are death and taxes. So we go to great lengths to avoid both. And one of them we can be marginally successful at avoiding. Sometimes people find ways and means, go and live in a, what are they called? In those islands where, right, tax haven, you avoid that. But death is something that none of us can avoid. And it's this incredible thing that, in spite of the fact that it's certain for all of us, somehow we think that we can avoid it. We don't recognize the reality of it. In the Mahabharata, there's an interesting portion where Yudhishthira meets this sort of heavenly being, a yaksha, and he has to be tested. This yaksha is asking him all these questions. And he asks Yudhishthira, what is the greatest wonder in this world? And he says, the fact that we see death almost every day, and yet we never think of our own. We never think that we're going to die. But it's the only thing that's sure, right? If I'm born, there is no guarantee what will happen within my lifespan. But if I'm born, I'm definitely going to die. And for a lot of people, this is scary because death means the end. Okay? Death means one, the end, and death means two, uncertainty. What exactly is going to happen at death or after death is the scary thing. But if we think about what happens in death, right? If death really is the end, for me, forget anyone else, right? Because this is not talking about anybody else's death. This is talking about ours. If death really is the end, then I will not continue through that experience of death. When is an experience painful, right? If you think about when you experience pain, nobody likes pain because we have to suffer through it, right? It starts and then it continues for some time, and then eventually it comes to an end. But through all that experience of pain, I'm there and I'm suffering through it. But if death is an end, then the only way that it's painful is if I'm there when death is over. Right? But if I'm not there, then how can death be painful? If I come to an end, right? Why do we think of it this way? Why do we enjoy sleep so much? Because when we wake up in the morning, we feel really good, right? Like, I had a really good sleep. I feel very rested and refreshed. So we enjoy it because we're there after it's done. We're scared of death because we don't know what comes after. And at the same time, we think of death as an end. So if it really is an end, there's nothing to be scared of because I won't be there. But implicit in this fear of death is that there will be something after death. And if there is something after death, then what is there for me to be afraid of? Right? Then the fear is uncertainty. So what will happen to me, or what will happen to everyone else? And that question really is easily addressed in that most people continue with their life, even after some loss, or even when that loss is very tragic. Usually we continue. But the question here is, how can I move past my fear of death? So one is, if I understand that, really speaking, it's not an ending. Then if my fear is of the uncertainty, we know that we manufacture or we shape our destiny through our actions. Right? This much at least we are familiar with. So if I do good today, then I'm assured that my future will be somewhat positive. And so if I've been doing good my whole life, then there is no reason for me to fear death or what comes after. So that way, also in a relative sense, there need not be any fear of death. But here, the negation of this fear is from a very different perspective. If you think about why we're scared of death, or why we have fear in general, at the root of most of our fear is some attachment or another. We are scared of losing things or losing people because we have attached our happiness to that person or to that experience or to that thing. And therefore, the prospect of losing it is very frightening. So if the reason that we're scared of death is attachment, what is the antidote to attachment? Detachment, right? So if you attach, then develop detachment. But also, what's so powerful is love. And if we can develop enough love, that love overpowers and allows us to let go of our attachment. And where there is love, generally there is no fear. But where there is attachment, there will definitely be fear. There was a boy and a girl, two siblings. And this boy was elder. And his younger sister was once very, very sick. And she needed a blood transfusion. And so the doctors were sort of trying to find someone who could give her this blood, and they needed it quite quickly. And so they asked this boy, he was also quite young, that can you give, if you give blood to your sister, then you'll be helping to save her, she'll get better, etc. So this little boy looking quite scared for a little while, and then finally he agreed. Yes, if it's going to save my sister, then definitely I will do whatever it takes. So they arranged a time and they took the blood from him and gave it to his sister. And a couple of hours after he had blood taken, he goes to his doctor. And he says, "Doctor, please could you tell me when I'm going to die?" He thought that him giving blood meant he was giving his life. And so he was just waiting. Now, in that scenario, right, for those of us who understand what it means, there is no fear, because we understand that giving blood is not something that I can not recover from. But if I think that I have to give my life for someone, then the only thing that will allow me to make that sacrifice and to do it without fear is love. And so you think of people throughout history who have had absolutely no fear of death because they have had great love for something inspiring, something higher. Okay? You take the sort of freedom fighters of any country, or even at a personal level, people who've had to sacrifice their life for loved ones. There is no fear because of that love. So love is an incredibly powerful force. Here, we're still not even talking about attachment. Right? The reason that there is no fear of death here if you think about why is it that we have attachment, right? Why do we develop attachment to any person or thing or situation or experience? What is the basis of our attachment? So usually we'll say we have likes and dislikes, right? And that's why we develop attachment to the things that we like. But why do we have likes and dislikes? Right. So there is this notion, right? It's not even knowledge, it's not even a fact, but there is this notion that this thing or this person will make me happy. And because it's reinforced by our experiences, that notion gets cemented, right? And it's reinforced by our experiences because we're experiencing the world according to our likes and dislikes. So it's like a self-confirming belief. The world in itself, any person or anything or any place or situation, if you ask anybody, right, even anybody, is happiness the nature of any object? Nobody will say yes. It doesn't matter if they've attended self-unfoldment or not. If they know any Vedanta, nobody will agree that happiness can be the nature of any object. And yet, we continue to live our life as though there is happiness in things and in experiences and in people or in relationships. And that's because we just have the idea that it's there. So now if I have the idea that there is happiness in a particular thing, then of course I will be afraid to let go of that thing. Because the thing that we're seeking the most is happiness. So if I have the idea that there is happiness in being in this body and living as this body, then the notion of death will bring sorrow. Right? Then the notion of death will be scary. But if I understand that happiness is not in the things and beings of this world, happiness is my own nature, then there is no fear. This is a big leap, right? From thinking that happiness is there in the world for me to experience and find, and then going to happiness is within me, and actually I'm the nature of happiness. This requires some work. Not going to happen in one step. But the fundamental thing here is we seek happiness in things and beings and situations, etc., because there is an even deeper underlying notion which we have never questioned, and that is these things and people are different from me. Right? The fundamental assumption that we make that is not questioned, that then allows for our likes and dislikes to be built on top of that, allows for attachment, allows for this idea of happiness, is that I am different and I'm separate from everything and everyone in this world. And then when you have this idea of plurality or duality, then it's very easy to say there is happiness in XYZ. So let me go and find it. Let me experience that, and then I will get what I'm looking. And this is the level at which Vedanta is addressing our fears. Right? By saying that actually that fundamental duality, that's not real. And therefore there is no reason for fear. Because fear arises only when there is duality. Right? If you are home alone, nobody is there, you're enjoying yourself, you're doing whatever you like. Nobody is there to judge you, or sitting in your pajamas and enjoying yourself. There is absolutely no fear. Right? The second you hear a sound, or you hear something that makes it sound as though somebody else is in your home with you, immediately the first thought will be of fear. Because now there is one, a second person, and two, they're unknown. Right? As soon as you know who that second person is, everything is fine. But it's the unknown, that's what brings us this huge anxiety and fear. And so here what's being said is, the reason for the absence of fear is that there is no duality. Okay? So now what's the link here? Because on the one hand, you're saying no duality. On the other hand, you're saying death. Okay? There is no duality. There is just one infinite self or truth. If I am that infinite self or truth, which I must be because there's no second, then there is no such thing as death for me. That which has no beginning and end cannot have birth or death. So this is the basis of this reasoning. Basically, as long as I think that I'm this body, I have death and I will have fear of death. If I can even get to the point where I understand myself to be not this body, but a mind or a jiva, which is going from life to life, then also I won't have any fear. Okay? As it's said in the Gita, then in that case, death is just like changing clothes. And what's the big deal there? You may be very attached to a particular set of clothes, but you wear them all day and you want to change. So if I understand I have nothing to do with this body as the self, or even as a jiva, then that fear of death is negated completely. The other side of this is, I also don't have any birth, right? If I don't have death, then I also don't have birth. There is one very famous story of a king, very attached to his son, because he had been wanting children for a very long time, couldn't have children, finally was blessed by some holy person, and the son was born. And this person told the king and his wife that your son is not going to live long. Okay? He is not going to have he's not going to live to ripe old age. So you enjoy him while he's there with you. So the king knew this. And sure enough, he lived like a few years and he died. Now this king is absolutely devastated, right? As any parent would be. And he refused to accept that his son had died. He said, no, I was blessed with a son. I didn't have any children, right? And this saint came and blessed me with a son. Now that saint should be able to bring my son back. He said, I refuse. You can't tell me that he's died. And every person he talked to said, listen, this is the reality. There's nothing that can be done. Finally, there is one particular rishi who came. And this king said to him, bring my son back. And this rishi saw that this king is not going to, he's just not going to let go, right? He's not going to have any peace of mind until he recognizes what's happened. So somehow this rishi called that jiva back to meet this king. And this king was so excited. And finally that individual, that jiva, came and he started weeping. He said, my son, we're lost without you. Please come back. We don't know, we can't live without you. And that jiva said to the king, I have had many fathers. Which one are you? We have lived so many lives, right? There's a beautiful description of the sort of relationships that we have in a lifetime, which we think are so enduring, so permanent. It says that those relationships are like, in a river, 2 grains of sand meeting in the current of a river. That's how ephemeral actually these relationships are. So here, when he says, I don't have father, mother, relative, friend, just to put all these relationships into context, that one is, as a jiva, I've had so many. And yes, the ones I have now are very special and dear to me. But I've had countless mothers and fathers, friends and relatives. And therefore, birth is also relative. Right? Death is relative. Birth is also relative. And everyone whom I associate with through this particular birth, all those relationships are also, they're only going to last for this lifetime. Even though we say when you get married, you have 7 lifetimes, okay, with that person. Who knows how you find each other again? This whole. But that's how sort of short they are. And this is, again, just from a relative standpoint, right? From the absolute standpoint, there is no body. How can there be any relationships? Now, the difficult one here is, he says, there is no guru and there is no shishya. And it's difficult because when we are strongly identified as, for example, a disciple of a particular guru, it's very difficult to have that relationship negated. Because the other thing is, in all our other relationships, we are drawn more and more into this world and more into those relationships. Right? Whereas this one unique relationship between guru and student is the one that actually paves the way for us to become free. And so someone who's understood that says, okay, I understand all my other relationships are relative, but how can you say that my relationship with my guru is false? Very difficult. Somebody may be very happy to accept their own status as guru, but not shishya also. It was very funny. Once somebody went to one guru and he said, I would really like to be your disciple. And the guru said, yeah, okay, there's certain things you'll have to do. So if you're ready to do that, then. So he said, okay, tell me what I'll have to do. So you have to wake up early in the morning. You'll have to clean the ashram. You'll have to go and get food for everybody. You'll have to look after the cows. You'll have to do this, that. And then you'll be the last person to go to sleep. First person to wake up, last to go to sleep. The student was listening. He said, what do you have to do to this guru? The guru said, I just teach, like I look after everybody I teach. So he said, I think I'll be a guru. I want to be a disciple. It's too hard. But both are relative, right? again, all of this is within the realm of duality. And the student often feels that, I really want to hold on to this relationship. But the guru wants that student to come out of that duality. Right? The reason the guru is teaching is so the student can recognize this duality is also false. That doesn't mean that the self-realized person will go and start disrespecting their guru. Right? In fact, exactly the opposite. Because having realized the truth, there is immense gratitude, etc. And therefore that relationship becomes even more beautiful. In other words, all of these things, right? Birth, death, our relationships with parents, with friends, with relatives, all of this is being negated from the standpoint of the absolute self. And so if I'm still thinking of myself as Shripriya, I can't say I have no mother and father. I have no birth and death. Because what I'm saying is I'm this body, and this body is definitely born, and this body is definitely going to die. So the only thing that works here is if I recognize what I'm not, and I recognize that I am of the nature of consciousness, bliss, then yes, then all of this is true. Then all of this is meaningful. Otherwise, it's like not a nursery rhyme, but it's just like anything else, right? So this is the only way that this works. Okay, so we have a few minutes left. So we've not done any practice these past 4 weeks. So we'll just have a few minutes of sitting quietly. So if you're sitting on a chair, then making sure both feet are on the floor, back straight. Sitting with legs crossed, again, back straight. Observe your body. Make sure you're not holding any tension in any part. Holding yourself alert but relaxed. Allow your breathing to deepen and become even. You find your mind wandering, focus on your breath. Keeping all the muscles in your body relaxed. Face relaxed, jaw relaxed. Keep your gaze soft. Just observe your breathing for a few moments. Without trying to change the pattern of your breath. Simply observe. Allow your breath to fill your body. Just as we observe our body and our breath, we also remain as the observers of our mind. Bringing in attention to your thoughts. simply observing each thought as it rises and as it dissolves. That I know my thoughts is a reminder that I am not my thoughts. My thoughts are known to me because they are other than me. As an observer, I remain unaffected and untouched by the thoughts. Each thought is different. Each thought is changing. I'm the unchanged witness of those thoughts. Each thought does not become known by itself. Each thought is known because I remain as the knower. Each thought that arises is dependent on me. I'm independent of all thoughts. Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Guru Pyo Namaha. Harihi Om.